So we have with us today two representatives from Justice for Migrant Families and two recently released detainees from the Batavia Detention Center who are going to talk to us about their experience in Batavia as well as the experience of COVID-19 in detention. And for those of you that are perhaps unfamiliar with what is Justice for Migrant Families and what is Batavia Detention Center, we will get to that momentarily. I first want to introduce our volunteers from Justice for Migrant Families and tell you that the relationship with Justice for Migrant Families and Canisius is pretty much since the beginning of Justice for Migrant Families, speaking, I think. We collaborate with Justice for Migrant Families for service learning, doing, well, until COVID, doing visitations at Batavia Detention Center and some various other activities in support and accompaniment of those detained there. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with what that is only about a 45-minute drive from Buffalo, from downtown Buffalo, roughly speaking. So it's right in our backyard. So I think that I'll pass this over to Anna and Kara to introduce themselves and Justice for Migrant Families, and then we can visit with our recently released detainees who have requested to be anonymous. So we will not be seeing their faces, and they are using pseudonyms. Oh, and before I pass it over, sorry, I just want to show the shirt, which is Mariposas Sin Fronteras. Where is it? There we go. Yeah, which is an organization in the southern border area that helps migrants who have been in different capacities of either deportation or detention. It primarily started as a support for LGBT migrants. It has morphed to support other migrants as well, but that is a partner organization that Canisius also has done some work with down in Arizona. So Kara and Anna, whichever one of you would like to go first.
Thank you. I can introduce myself first because I'm going to let Kara do the larger introduction to Justice for Migrant Families. But my name is Anna, and I am one of the visitation coordinators for Justice for Migrant Families. I'm originally from Syracuse, but I moved to Buffalo when I came here for University of Buffalo. And I fell in love with the city and the immigrant population, which led me to volunteer in different organizations and get really involved with Justice for Migrant Families. Yeah, so I'm the visitation coordinator, but that also entails a lot of other things, which Kara will, I think, describe.
Thank you, Anna. Kara.
My name's Kara, and I am the post-release coordinator and the court support coordinator for Justice for Migrant Families. And I'm also right now chair of the board. We recently became a 501c3. So yeah, and again, we keep expanding our titles because we wear many, many different hats. And we're a small grassroots, mostly volunteer run organization. Justice for Migrant Families started in October of 2016 when there were really big workplace raids in Buffalo, and more than 25 people were picked up by immigration enforcement, many of them detained. Children were put into child protective services, and families were split up. And as a response, the community, both community organizers, allies, different religious organizations kind of all came together to figure out how to support the people who were impacted by this. And there were protests, there were fundraisers, We did ESL classes at a church just to give people something to do, and started to just work with people as they went through very long and painful immigration proceedings. And through that process, we realized that in Buffalo, which is such a welcoming town for immigrants in general, there are many refugee resettlement agencies. There are a lot of immigrant-friendly organizations. There weren't specifically organizations aside from Vive that worked with undocumented immigrants or immigrants who were directly impacted by immigration enforcement in the kinds of ways like being detained inside of the detention center, having to go to ICE check-ins, those kinds of things. So this organization has been growing very quickly as we have learned about the needs of people who are detained, people who are recently released. Generally, what we do pre-COVID, we do accompaniment, which is, we do housing, court support, we do advocacy. So helping connect people to different kinds of resources, particularly legal resources. And under accompaniment also is visitation. It's been so long. It feels like COVID has been so long that I can't remember what we used to do. But accompaniment would also, visitation would be encompassed under that as well. And so that is a program that it has expanded rapidly, where many, many volunteers go every single weekend to the Buffalo Federal Detention Center in Batavia. And that is how most of our relationships are formed with people who are impacted by immigration enforcement. And that is where a lot of our work comes from. And then finally, because we cannot do this work without also working to change the very system that has created things like detention centers, ICE check-ins, immigration courts. We organize to change the system itself through things like the Green Light campaign that last year was put into law and restored driver's licenses to people who do not have an immigration status, and various other things like working locally to try to keep police from collaborating with ICE on a local level. So many, many arms to justice for migrant families.
Yes, there's such a need for so many different aspects of this. And just to let our listeners know, we will have links for many of these organizations or opportunities to volunteer, support financially, advocate on the legislative front as well. And also just to let our audience know that even though currently visitation is suspended due to COVID, there is the Pen Pal program that people could participate in, which is not the same thing as personal contact, but it is a way to maintain some sense of community and accompaniment with the people in Batavia. So perhaps let's have Apiman introduce himself first, and JB, and that is only based on an alphabetical order, nothing else, and tell us a little bit about their story. Maybe first they can tell us their story, how they're here, and then after both of them have introduced that, we can go back to how life was like pre-COVID and during COVID in Batavia. So Apiman, if you'd like to.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my name is Apiman, and today I want to first of all to thank you for this this conference, this opportunity to talk about first of all to talk about myself, talk about what happened with me when I was in detention because the COVID-19 pandemic was when it was appearing in this world. I was inside the detention where we had very too much fear of this pandemic. I will tell you that me, I'm a migrant from Africa. I've born in 1976. I'm a man. I'm father. I have 2 kids and a wife. They are back home in Africa. And I should tell you that I leave my country because of the persecution. I come to the United States to seek for protection, asylum, because I know you cannot do nothing without security. Because back home I had no security. I was working in the government, and that government now was about to kill me. That's why now today I seek for asylum. And when I talk about this, what happened to me, it is when I was, because first time when I come to the United States, I come with a visa, and I tried to go to Canada on the border. That's where immigration caught me on the border and put me in jail for a long time. And it was in March 7, 2020, where the governor of the state of New York issued an executive order declaring a disaster emergency for the entire state of New York. Everybody were in a detention after trying to provide all to do our means in order to fight for our cases. And this pandemic of COVID-19 came when we were in a fear, because when they declared this pandemic, they said that it was a deadly disease. That's why even CDC, when they talk about the measure they can take, it was also to try not to be together when we are like too much people together. And we had too much fear because we were in a like 40 to 50 people in the same room. We eat same food, we sleep together, and there were not any measure to fight against this pandemic. Whereas we saw officials, people who work in detention, they live in their family, but a day they spend a day in a detention. It means that they were together with us, even though coronavirus should not start in detention, should start outside, because it already start from outside, and people, they bring it, they come to work in our community, because it was a community of detainees. And it was also on March 11, 2020, the World Health Organization, when it declared that the outbreak of COVID-19 is globally pandemic, announcing that the virus is both highly contagious and deadly. It was very hard for us, because also after this time, the time of this declaration of World Health Organization, even President of United States in March 13, 2020, he declared a national emergency. To mean it was an emergency for everybody. But in detention, there was not doing anything for us. Today, only when I come back on that time, after like 10 days, because they hide that this pandemic is already in prison, in our detention. First of all, it was, they said that now they have 5 guys who are, who got this coronavirus, 5 people. Day by day, it was like, it was terrible, day by day. And that's why we tried to call our lawyers. Some people had no lawyers. Some people had the problem of communication. Some people had no families. Some people had, there are other guys, other detainees who are seeking for deportation because of this pandemic. To me, it was very terrible. It was I should not have something to talk about that. And when the CDC guidance was preventing the spread of the coronavirus in detention, some people who had a disability, particularly vulnerable, people who suffer from complication of like people they had people who had like diabetes, who had some disease. They think that anytime they can die. It means that from that time, government never think about people who are in detention, but step by step, they start to release some people because of this coronavirus. But these people, we didn't know, I was inside, we didn't know who decided about releasing detainees who have high risk to be exposed to the coronavirus. These conditions of confinement, we saw that created the ideal environment for the transmission of COVID-19. And the people who had been detained, who was in that situation, because of fear, when you have some disease, you know that disease and the fear of tomorrow, fear of death, of dying, and the fear of not having somebody who take care of you, you know that you become very wary. I mean, the risk of the COVID-19 pandemic constitutes a material change in a circumstance to people who are in detention. That's why for now, because they released me, it's because of this change of circumstance, even though some friends for me who were in detention like me, still being detained in detention. That's what I can say about the pandemic of coronavirus. Thank you.
Thank you, Apiman, for sharing your story. I think we'll go back to some questions we may have about your experience in a minute, but I'd like to give JB an opportunity to also introduce himself, how he found himself here, and his experience.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is JB. I am from one of the West African countries. I'm a college degree holder in mathematics and statistics. I finished my education from one of the universities in West Africa. I came from an average family of 6, my mom, my dad, and 3 younger siblings. After school, I became a banker and worked in 5 different banks. In 2017, precisely, I came into the United States with a B1, B2 visa. I actually overstayed my bounds in the United States. And the reason for that was basically because um, I wanted to be detained by the police in my country, based on the fact that they eventually got, though there was this unfounded allegation that I had, based on the fact that I'm a member of a particular social group in my country. I'm a member of the gay group in my country, and then they actually wanted to use the country's laws to try to get at me, and that was what changed my mind to stay back in the United States, being a country that is actually, that is free and fair in terms of judicial system, and I decided to seek for asylum under membership of a particular social group, and precisely gay members of my country. I was actually accosted by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Buffalo in 2018. I was placed into custody, and I ended up spending 25 months at the Buffalo Federal Detention Facility before I was ultimately released. It was a very traumatic experience, no doubt about that. I've never been detained in my life. I've never had any issue with the police or with any criminal background. I had never had such issues before. So it was extremely strange to me when I encountered this Immigration and Customs Enforcement in 2018. And in a very brutal manner, I experienced a very pathetic situation. From the very onset, we were arrested. I was actually with a friend, and we were actually approaching. I came from Queens, where I was living, to Buffalo to actually see a friend. And then we went to a bank in a place called Chitwaga to try to get, to try to look to see whether I had credits into my account. And then subsequently from there, we met this man who happened to be the bank manager, and then he was kind of probably a racist, if I should call him, because he was a white guy. And then he wasn't comfortable with the fact that two black guys were actually coming into the environment. And then he accosted us, and then we had a conversation. And from there, apparently the bottom line was that he was the one that called the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And at that point in time, unfortunately for us, let me put it that way, we were just at the other side of the road to have lunch. If we had known, we would have probably left. Probably that wouldn't have happened. But we were at the other side of the road to have lunch when we finished, and we were actually approaching the hotel where I lodged, that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement just pulled us over, and then the rest became history today. Now, honestly speaking, if you are talking in terms of what actually happened at the facility, probably I will reserve my time until you have questions for me, because if I go into that, I don't know whether I will be able to exhaust all the problems at stake, honestly.
Well, thank you, JB, for sharing your story with us. So it might be useful for our listeners to understand how it is that JB and Apiman, who were in the detention center, no longer are in the detention center. So Anna, if you could maybe give a very brief summary without getting into the details of their individual cases, how it comes to be.
Yeah, and I will preface this by saying I am not a lawyer, so I'm going to put this in very layman terms, how I understand it, but it's not technically in any legal term. So because of COVID, there were new regulations and rules and a change of circumstances for a lot of people. So in order to make sure the detention centers don't become a death sentence, there need to be regulations, and people who are medically vulnerable were able to be put onto class actions or ask for release, submit motions for release on medical grounds in order to get released. That does not mean that people's cases are finished, that they've won asylum, that they get to stay inevitably. It means that they are still going through proceedings, but those proceedings will go on outside of detention. They need to go to court and continue their case, but they are able to do it outside of the detention center. And actually, that is one of the ways that Justice for Migrant Families kind of changed in this pandemic. One of the things that we tried to do as a result was all of the people that we know that didn't have lawyers and were medically vulnerable, we sort of did emergency trying to connect people to legal resources in order to get those release requests in. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you, Anna. And has Justice for Migrant Families helped find housing for people that have then been released under those conditions?
Yes, and Kara's a big person who does that.
Kara, do you want to speak to that briefly?
Yeah, so we did housing before this. Of course, when people came in for court hearings, we had volunteers who opened up their homes to them for short-term housing for 2 or 3 days while the person and accompanied that person to court. Sometimes we also helped connect people to long-term housing like Vive la Casa, which is run by Jericho Road, where it's a kind of shelter for people going through immigration proceedings. And Vive closed down, of course, with COVID. No volunteers were able to open their homes to people. And there was a kind of public health crisis that we started realizing that with people being released, and initially we were hoping that many, many more people would be released than actually were. So we were planning for trying to do quarantine housing for hopefully 40, 50, 60, 100 people. We had regional meetings to try to do this with allies across the state. And we contacted people who had previously been renting their spaces and now for whatever uses. And now during the pandemic, they just had these empty spaces and people were struggling financially, are struggling financially. So they were very willing to help us out for a small fee to help house people. And this was just for quarantine because just quickly, the way that releases happen at the detention center is there's very little notice. Sometimes we have no notice that someone is going to get released. People are driven in a van to a gas station that also is a bus station, and they are dropped off there. They may or may not have money. They may or may not have ID. It may be winter. It may be a hailstorm. It may be raining outside, and they have the clothes that they came in with, basically. They do not have protective equipment. They don't have a mask, hand sanitizer, food, and they're just left there. And hopefully, most people can figure out how to get on a bus, coordinate with some family members, and then with the people we knew, we were sending volunteers using health measures and protective measures in cars to help transport people back. But our thought was that all of these people are being released, then they're getting on a bus, then they're going to expose their communities, their families possibly, during a time when at least 50 people were testing positive in the detention center. So quarantine housing in which a person could stay for 14 days and just rest and heal before going home became really an important thing that we did. Right now, because testing is so widely available and so fast, when someone is released and is not going to be staying in Buffalo long term, we could just house that person for 2 to 3 days while they go get tested, and then they, help them get home safely. But lots of housing changes.
Yes, thank you for those details. And I want to reassure Apiman and JB that we'll go back to them in just a minute, but I'd like to clarify a couple questions. Are people still being released from Batavia under the COVID exigencies?
I would say no. The way that people, again, we were hoping that people would be released because they were medically vulnerable, for humanitarian parole, for a lot of different reasons. And I would say that most of the people I came into contact with were released because there were organizations that were fundraising to pay bonds. And they raised an enormous amount of money because bonds in Batavia are notoriously high. A low bond would be $10,000. And a normal bond would be like $25,000. So asylum seekers don't come with that kind of money. Most people don't have that kind of money. So there were lots of organizations just working to get people out through bonds. And unfortunately, it was not because the detention center saw fit to just release people.
Okay. Do we have any statistics in terms of how many people were infected in Batavia?
I knew at one point, and I know this number is not exact, but I think it was around, right now they are saying that it is at 0, that everyone has recovered. I don't have any confirmation of that, but at the time when most people were being infected, I think it was around 50 people. And most of those people were in the same unit, and it took quite a while to get those people tested in terms of when they started showing symptoms versus when they finally got tested. And most people in that unit, once they did get tested, almost everyone was positive.
That's, yeah, wow.
And I just want to say also, we can put this on as a link, but Freedom for Immigrants, a group that we work with, it does kind of detention center tracking and monitoring. They have been putting out a monthly report on detention centers during this time. And they take information, that these kind of groups like Justice for Migrant Families gives them, and then compiles a report. And in their latest report, they have some really interesting statistics about how places, including Batavia, where the numbers were very high, there were very high numbers of positive cases, are suddenly down to 0. And that's just trying to show that this is happening in a lot of different places, and that it doesn't seem likely
Right.
that kind of recovery rate can happen so quickly. So we can put a link to that if people want to know more.
Yes, thank you, Kara. Did anyone officially die from COVID in Batavia detention?
Not that I know of. Most of the people that I talked to, so I talked to a lot of people actually in the unit that was affected. This was B2, and a lot of the people I talked to, they recovered, but that doesn't mean they had no symptoms. Some of the people I talked to did have to go to the hospital, and at least one of the people that I talked to has damage to his lungs as a result of COVID. He got a chest x-ray and it shows that there is damage.
Mm-hmm. And one last question on this. I had read that despite the infection rate, detainees were being shipped in and out of the center, thus possibly spreading the disease to other detention facilities. Can you verify that?
Yes, most definitely. Around March, I really should have the exact dates, but around March 11th and 12th, people were transferred in from New Jersey, and that was a detention center or a jail that had COVID. So people were transferred in right before this was declared a pandemic and suspension was ended, or suspended, sorry. Visitation was suspended. And then around, I want to say April 11th and 12th, people were shipped to Texas in what I think was a very inhumane way. So people were testing positive in Batavia, and there was a push to get the numbers down, which we were calling for them to free people who were in the detention center. And instead, people were put on a plane and transferred to Prairieland Detention Center in Texas. Those people were not tested before they were put on a plane. And once they arrived, they did test them once they arrived, and people tested positive. Prairieland Detention Center then started getting a lot of cases of COVID-19. And I think by moving people who could possibly have COVID without taking any precautions or testing before moving people, this is a systematic way of taking away people's rights and putting people in danger. And sorry, on this point, one more thing. I've talked to a lot of the people who have been transferred. So one of the people I'm close with, he called me the morning that he was transferred, and he just said, I was told to pack my bags. I don't know what's happening. Am I being deported? I don't know where I'm going. They were given no information. And then I was texting lawyers. I was trying to figure out where these people were going. I just knew that their accounts were shut off and they were told to pack their bags. And then it was the next, I can't remember, it was the next day. I guess it was the next day that I found out where they were. And as I talked to these people, they describe the conditions in all of the places they've been. And for someone that I know who went from New Jersey to Batavia and then to Texas, all within 1 month time, or approximately 1 month time, he said that the conditions in New Jersey were bad, but better than Batavia. Batavia then was better than Texas, and now they are they're getting transferred to places that have worse and worse protections against COVID without first being tested. So it's just passing this disease around and not taking the protection or what they should be doing to protect a person's life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And part of the reason that we think that is behind that is then, putting pressure on the detention center when we and a lot of other organizations were putting pressure to release people and saying, you are creating basically, death traps inside these prisons for people. Then they could say, well, look, we reduced the population there, right? But they did so in an absolutely irresponsible, inhumane way that put many more, like hundreds and hundreds of more people in danger. So.
And sorry, a couple more follow-ups to this. You mentioned approximately 50 were infected in Batavia. How many detainees did Batavia normally hold?
I believe the number that they normally hold is around 650. Is that correct, Kara? Around
650 is their capacity. So in the past year, it has been known that they've gone beyond that to like 700 or so.
And currently they are lower because they released some people and also transferred and deported a lot of other people. So I think their numbers are about in half capacity.
Okay. Now, it might be useful to remind some of our listeners who may be unfamiliar with immigration processes and detention that these are not criminal cases. And I think that that is an important thing to remind people of, that while it is detention, it is not detention as in jail for criminal behavior, even though it looks like a jail. These are different situations. And I don't know if you want to speak to that for a little more clarification, Kara or Anna, but.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Me too.
Sorry. Ooh. Yeah, it is essentially a prison, but for people who have committed no crimes. Immigration cases are all civil crimes. Immigration violations are civil, not offenses, similar to a traffic violation. So I just would like people to imagine what would happen if every time you ran a stoplight or a stop sign, you went through a stop sign, they gathered you up and they put you in a building with a ton of other people who would run through stop signs, and then prevented you from like contacting your family, finding out why you were there, getting a lawyer, you know, like it is a bewildering situation. And the other people who are inside detention have not committed any civil offenses, but are asylum seekers. And that is a perfectly legal right in the United States to go to a border and claim asylum within 1 year of arriving in the US. So these are people who are here legally. These are people who have are put into a prison that is a prison without being called so. So it's an absolutely temporary place. There are no programs. There's no structure for things. There are very few amenities at all. Amenities, like it's a whole, you know, it is a brutal system for people who are just trying to go through immigration proceedings.
Thank you for that explanation. I just feel it's important to sort of clarify that. Not that anyone in any situation is deserving of less than humane treatment, but I just wanted to clarify that these issues are not criminal issues that people are dealing with, and that's important to remember.
Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
Okay, this is a thing that some people sometimes say is like, well, there are people there who have committed crimes. And there are people there who at one point in their life have committed crimes of what in the immigration laws are called moral turpitude. So basically any minor level offense can land you into immigration detention. But they have committed those crimes and then they have paid the fines and served the time. And once they're out, then they're put in another prison. So again, just to say, it would be like you serve a prison sentence for committing a crime, and then you are taken out of that prison and you are put into a different prison because you were put into prison before.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Thank you.
Can I say something, Mr.?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much. Me too. I want to appreciate this conversation. First of all, I want to thank Anna. She was talking about some situation, because me too, I was among people who was transferred to Texas from Batavia in April 11. And also this was a psychology harm and the damage, because, you know, when they say that we transfer you to another detention because of this pandemic, I was sure that it is a way to release me. But after, when I was at the airport, they bring me back to in detention. It was after 11 days, in April 22, when they released me. To me, the experience I made in a detention, because detention was divided in 3 categories. Because there are people who are in red, criminals, people who are in orange, this is the uniform, people who made some traffics, and others who are in blue, who made some violation of US regulation. And it doesn't mean that you are in blue that your case is easy, but naturally, we know that when you are blue, when even somebody say that you are blue, it means that you are not like a red. Red, it means that it is a high risk. But me, I was inside the detention in a blue uniform for 3 years. When some people who are in red, when they have family, even though you are a criminal, even though you was making traffic, even they don't care about your case. I was inside the detention for 3 years, whereas a criminal can make only 1 week and they release him. And that's why every day you see people who, after 1 week or 2 weeks, they continue the same. They call it to recidivism. They do again the same mistake. People who kill, and they bring him again in detention. That's why after they deport. Whereas somebody who is in the blue, who didn't do anything, should be maybe in detention for, I should tell you, for a long time. That's why I was trying to give nuance of this situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm going to just clarify a few things because I know I understand what he's talking about, but some people who have never been into the detention center, when you hear blue, orange, red, it's confusing. So there are different uniforms that people in the detention center wear depending on whether they are classified as high risk or lower risk. And you get put into different units based on this. Typically, blue is the lowest risk and red is the highest risk. You can get moved between different colors for different reasons. I don't fully understand the system, but that is what he is describing. And so what he is saying is, even as Kara discussed how it shouldn't really matter if someone has done a crime in the past because they've already served their sentence, that doesn't always impact, even thinking of it that way, everyone is on a civil offense, and someone who is in blue, who has never done any kind of crime, can be in there for 4 years, a long time, as well as someone who has been in red. The other thing that he said was that he was in the group that was transferred to Texas, and I remember this moment because I was like, we know him so well. We have talked to him for so long and we've built this relationship. And I heard that his account was closed and he was taken to the airport to be transferred. Luckily, he ended up it was a mistake and he was still in Batavia when I next checked in on him. But the way that they tell people they are transferred, the way they tell people they are released, there is no warning. They just say, pack your bags. So there's no understanding of what's going to happen, and that really can affect you. But it also this transferring of people can also really impact your case because, for example, when Apiman was going to be transferred, I was very worried because he has built all these connections in Buffalo, right? It takes a long time to build those connections and those resources. Once you are transferred, it's so much harder to make those connections. And in order to be released, you need to have connections. That is one of the requirements that many judges look at, is having community connections. And so by transferring people, that is one thing that they kind of take away. They're breaking apart these connections that people have worked to make, and what we as Justice for Migrant Families are working all the time to do. Sorry, that was a tangent on top of that, but hopefully that clarified something.
Yes, thank you. Particularly for our listeners who may not know the details of the processes, right? I think both Apiman and JB hinted at the crowded conditions that pre-existed COVID, the fact that you take meals together in large groups, that your sleeping arrangements are also in group formats, that that basically there's no opportunity for social distancing. And I wonder if JB and Apiman, you would like to speak about how the situation was exacerbated with the arrival of COVID-19 in detention. For example, I'm sure our listeners are wondering, did you have hand sanitizer? Were you issued masks? Were you able to social distance? Were you able to wash your hands? The protocols that all of us were drilled on, were these things available to you?
All right. Thank you very much. I think first and foremost, I would like to actually appreciate the way Anna and Kara had actually put all these issues in the right perspective. I wouldn't have even done more, because the truth of the matter is that they have actually described the situation just the way it is. What I'm going to go through, just like what you've said and your question, I will go through it all over again. By design, the facility harbors about 600 detainees, okay, at optimal capacity in 9 different units, with about 64 detainees in each unit. Before the pandemic, detainees faced a lot of problems, ranging from medical issues, court-related issues, feeding issues, feeding problems, and so on. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic now made it worse. This is a virus that spreads without any cure or vaccination. You see, the CDC guidelines stipulated that social distancing is key to avoiding the spread of the virus. Now, imagine having these detainees in this kind of confined setting, sharing common spaces, eating together, sleeping almost next to each other, and sharing bathrooms. No sanitizers for the detainees. Soaps are scarcely made available. It is equally important to mention that despite all the notices via television stations, radio, and social media, Immigration and Custom Enforcement continue to bring new intakes at that point in time. New intakes that were not properly scrutinized before being admitted. Detention officers go to their various houses at the end of their shifts and return to the facility the following day without mechanism in place to check whether they have been exposed to the virus or not before getting back to work. The medical unit is not even equipped at all to handle that situation at that point in time, as there are no ventilators in place to take care of infected detainees, should there be. Therefore, when the virus eventually found its way through, it spread like wildfire. Based on all the above mentioned, it is obvious that the facility was not ready for that kind of situation. Yet, they insisted on keeping all detainees, endangering their lives, as if immigrants are humans from another planet that are not entitled to having a right to live in a safe and adequate environment. Like I said before, it took a lawsuit or a class action for me to finally gain my freedom from that facility. It took the intervention of various organizations, as Anna and Kara had rightly mentioned, like the Justice for Migrant Families, before the very few detainees recently released was actually achieved. Now, this is my take on all this. Immigration detainees are mostly asylum seekers who have gone through various traumas in their various countries before arriving in the United States. And it is so bad that immigration and customs enforcement officials do their job with no human conscience and treat immigrants as if they are animals. Despite all that being endured by the detainees, it will not augur well if lives are lost based on their nonchalant attitude by failing to release most of these detainees. The pandemic is still on. As at April 2020, over 50 detainees have been infected and still counting. You see, the truth of the matter is that I don't really believe what comes out from all these immigration officials. That is my own take on this. I was a victim. I was there. I saw it live. I knew what was going on. I saw how information is being strictly managed within the system, such that they don't want it to go out there and feed the populace with negativities. So, as far as I'm concerned, I would not be shocked if eventually there are cases of death in this particular situation. But like I said, if a detainee is being asked to pack up from a unit, at that point, other detainees know nothing about that particular detainee anymore. So they can actually come up with the fact that, oh yeah, he's been deported. Oh yeah, he's been moved to another facility. And since you are in a confined setting, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to connect with that fact. So you let it go, or leave it the way it is. You only take or absorb whatever that you must have been told. I have a friend who, because of this pandemic, was so scared to the point that he was the one that opted for deportation. He couldn't cope with it anymore because he was scared. And they said, okay, you want to leave? It took the intervention of Saudi Arabia government to actually get that guy out of that facility. Not that he didn't want to quit like that, but because of this particular pandemic, he was scared of his life, the way and manner it was spreading. Now look at it. He finally got to Saudi Arabia. He was now confirmed to have COVID-19. So he's currently, I've not even heard from him now in a while. I don't know his current state. I've been trying to get hold of him. So imagine somebody that left with the mindset of, oh, I don't want this to happen to me. But already he had it. And they could not point that out while he was there until he got to his country before it was finally discovered that he had that COVID-19. So this is my final take on this. Despite all that despite all the things that immigrants endure, it will not augur well if lives are lost based on their own nonchalant attitude by failing to release most of these detainees. Like I said, the count is on. I cannot categorically hold on to that statistics that they are back to zero. I don't want to believe that. Now, this administration is therefore, this is my plea now. This administration is therefore respectfully implored to be more sensitive to the plight of immigrant detainees at various detention centers in the country. They are human beings. They have lives too. And they have the right to live in a very secured environment, just like any other person. So this is my humble submission on all this. Thank you.
Thank you, JV, for articulating your thoughts on this and your experiences. I wonder if Apiman and JB, you'd like to maybe tell us a bit about what life is like post Batavia, as you're still dealing with your immigration processes, but you know, we're still in phases of quarantine and still trying to figure things out. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the now of your experiences.
Okay. Yeah.
Apollina, do you want to go, or I should talk about mine?
Okay, become your hand now, we can go. Or let me go, because now I'm talking.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to, first of all, to thank Justice for Migrant Family, because they are the one who intervened, who accepted to take care of me the first day they said that they released me. It was in April 2022. The first thing they did, it was to find a place where I should make this 2 weeks of quarantine. First of all, 2 weeks of quarantine, even though when I was in detention, they saw that I had no this corona. I was not infected, but it was very understandable that I should not leave the place where they said that 48 detainees had coronavirus. When you are from there, you cannot come in a society and continue your life like that. That's why they put me in quarantine for 2 weeks, and I finished these 2 weeks in quarantine without any contact with anybody. That's why after I moved from the place, now I'm free. And to be free means also that I try to be careful with the pandemic. I try to wash my hand. What I was not doing inside the detention, because they had no hand sanitizer. But right here, I put my mask every time, and I practice social distancing as CDC stated. That's why today I should say that coronavirus, it is a pandemic, but when you are careful, you can avoid it. That's what I can talk about today. The place where I am today with JB, we know that there is no visit people from outside. We cannot accept people to visit, because we know that corona, it is contagious and it is a respiratory illness. That's why we try to be far from friends. We know that we have friends, but we cannot accept to be with friends because we know, because anytime we should be infected. That's what I can tell you for a moment. Thank you.
Apiman, you mentioned that you are masking currently. When you were in detention, did you have masks?
No, over there they cannot. They say that they have no mask for everybody. Okay. Because me, I had a job inside the detention. When I'm working, they gave me mask because I was working. I said, give me mask because I'm working. I cannot be in contact with people. I make my glove and my mask because of job. After job, you cannot make this mask anytime, because they say that they have no mask for everybody. That's what they say. But today, we know that you cannot go in a crowd without a mask. That's what changed in my life from there to here.
And in detention, did the officers and others not in detention but at the facility, were they using masks?
No, them they have mask. They have
Exactly.
only them they have masks. Only detainees they have not.
That is interesting.
You can see the kind of disparity we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that well, as classifying themselves as if they are different species, they want to take care of themselves extremely to the extent that they do not have that virus. However, they have a job to do and they want to protect themselves as much as they could. But what about the people that means the people you are there for, the people that had actually, it's actually because of them that you have that job. I mean, it's, if not for this class action suit that started the whole thing, the issue of social distancing was not even a subject at all. They talked about the fact that you have a congested environment where and they just come and just verbally telling us that we should social distance. How do you want to do that? When you have, when you eat the same environment, you are sleeping together in the same small portion of space, 4 people in a confined small portion, you know, with double bunks. That's why I said sleeping almost next to each other. And now when the judge, the district court judge said, okay, you should look at how you guys are going to do the social distancing. Then they said, okay, they will achieve it. And they came out, they will pull out for just those people that were part of the class action. They pulled everybody from their own space. They pulled them out, leaving them all by themselves, leaving others by themselves. Which does not really make any sense because it's still the same environment. More so, even the next person next to me, because I was part of that class action, was not even up to 6 feet away from my own place. So it just it can't just work in a confined setting like that. It can't work. It can't work. And now coming back to post-life situation right now, post-detention situation. First and foremost, I need to, like Happy Man said, we have to really, really give it to the Justice for Migrant Family. They've been very wonderful. But all the volunteers, I mean, I've never said that in my life before. And that particular name has actually become a household name in Batavia. It's like that is where everybody wants to be because they will help you in terms of everything, get you court support, get you attorneys, try to see how you're going to probably get letters of support. They go to the extreme length of ensuring that you get what you want to be comfortable, even though the trauma you are facing there itself is nothing to write home about. So at the end of the day, getting out of that environment after spending 25 months was a different ball game for me entirely. First and foremost, I was utterly shocked when I was placed in a very nice apartment. And I was like, really? Am I dreaming or something? And then it really gave me an opportunity for me to regain my sanity. Because let me just give you this example. When I came out of the facility and I held on to my phone after 25 months, I couldn't even know how to operate the phone again. I was looking, where will I press? How will I make a call? What's going on? Because, I mean, you've been out of touch for a very long time. So you need time to gradually come back to the reality of life and get yourself into the system again. So that really afforded me an opportunity to re-strategize, to sit down again, try to get myself acquainted with a lot of things again. And at the end of the day, it was really, really a wonderful situation that I eventually ended up, most especially with that particular apartment that I was given to stay. I was shocked. So living there and moving there and then again and again and again, they've been very, very supportive. Very, very supportive. And we wouldn't have had it any better. So, and not only that, now they have even gone to the extent of, recently we've been having dancing classes up and down everywhere. Anna takes us around, Kara takes us to dancing classes and stuff like that. It's really, really good when you have good people around you and you have been surrounded with a lot of good people. And that's when you can see that you will even be focused in whatever you're doing, even though it has not ended. But you will have that optimistic mindset that, okay, things will surely be better. So, and if a lot of people can tag along and we have so many more people into this kind of situation, the whole world will be better for it. So I'm really, really imploring, one, to say a very big thank you to all the volunteers at the Justice for Migrant Family, and then to ask many other people who have the ability to be part of this struggle too. Because a lot of people over there, I have seen firsthand where a detainee wanted to take his life, all because he doesn't even have any hope anymore. He thought he was coming into this country to have a better life. But at the end of the day, he found himself in a confined setting of which he had never experienced in his life before. So it became so confusing to the point that he couldn't just take it anymore. On a Sunday morning, he stood up and all he wanted to do was just to end. It took the intervention of myself and some other people to call the attention of all these other officers to say, hey, listen, this guy wants to do something desperate before he was eventually, and that kind of person, what do you think would have happened? He was supposed to be probably given a guidance, talked to. He was taken to what we call SHU, Special Housing Unit, for trying to take his life. That is like an additional punishment. So the perspective is not right. The orientation is not right. The mentality even of the officers that are even there, I want to say with all due respect that they probably need more training to know how human beings are being dealt with, to know how you can handle human beings in a very humane manner. And that is very, very key in this situation. So thank you for for all that we've enjoyed so far. And then like I've always been saying, myself and Happy Man, we cannot afford to let them down. We'll continue to be strong. We'll continue to hold we'll be what do I call it now? Good ambassadors of should I say detainees that have been released from Batavia. So, and I think, like I said, I just want to thank everybody for this wonderful opportunity.
Well, JB and Apiman, thank you for your honesty and your willingness to share your stories with us, and for your optimism. I think that even in difficult situations, to keep the faith, as it were, is important, and I'm delighted to see that. And I sincerely hope that your cases progress to a positive outcome. I want to ask Kara and Anna just one question as well before we kind of close and give everybody a chance to say anything else before we end. But Kara and Anna, how do you take care of yourselves to be able to provide the inspiration and support that JB was just mentioning that is so important to them? How, because you can't draw water from a dry well. And so I wonder what strategies you use to be able to then take care of yourselves, to then offer the support for Apiman and JB and so many others.
I don't know if Kara and I are the best example of people who take care of ourselves. I work too much, but I do like to go garden, be outside in nature. But I also think the thing that draws me to this work is that I get to meet amazing people. So you are hearing about all these injustices, but you're also making relationships. And so my phone is ringing all the time in order to get people lawyers, hearing about abuses, trying to connect people to their family they haven't talked to. But it's also mixed in with times where I'm playing music from my computer on my phone and we're dancing in separate places, or I'm laughing with them, getting to know them. And I think that is actually what keeps me going. It's not something necessarily I do to take care of myself, but I think this is work that is based in relationships. And so relationships fuel me. So not just being shocked at injustices, but also taking the time to get to know the people I'm working with in order to like see them as humans and friends. And I think that is actually the most important thing in terms of taking care of myself, is remembering that people are humans and we have times of bad times, but also good times.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna. Kara, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I would just back that up, that relationships are the thing that motivates this work for me, and that creates like the whole spectrum of human feeling. And I have a very regular schedule on purpose. I go to bed at 9 o'clock every night. Yes, I do. I wake up very early. I go to dance class. I go running. I'm outside a lot. So I didn't always do that at the beginning of this. And there was definitely a learning curve about what I needed with my own particular background, and to be able to show up for other people. So it's apparently the schedule of a senior citizen is what I need. So
no judgment, Kara.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm fine with it.
Well, I'd like to give everyone an opportunity to say any last things that you feel we haven't covered or that you would like to state before I wrap it up. Apiman, JB, Anna, Kara, any last words?
Well, I just want to use this opportunity to say a very big thank you for this wonderful space that we are actually using to address this issue. And I hope that the listeners too will ultimately be able to take a cue from this and then take it up to the next level. So I thank everybody into this struggle. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, JB.
Yeah, me too. I wanted to wish you to stay safe, because this pandemic, this global status, even though today they are saying that they are trying, researchers, they're trying to find medicine. It was a pandemic we never seen in this world. To me, I will wish you again to stay safe and pray for you, pray God to put in His hands. That's what I can say.
Well, thank you, Apiman, and you stay safe as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to also thank all the people for listening, but I think one thing that we didn't necessarily touch on too much, but just this idea of listening and paying attention is really important. We talked at the very beginning about how we have like a visitation program in the detention center where people can go visit and talk to people, and how that got suspended because of COVID. And there's very good reasons for it being suspended. We don't want outside people bringing in coronavirus into the detention center, but it's also a very dangerous situation. So if we don't have outside visitors, it's hard to keep people accountable, to keep an eye on what is going on. And so just you guys listening to this, that's a start, but also keep listening, keep following the news. One of the big things that changed when COVID hit was that instead of me organizing visiting, I'm talking to the people on the phone all the time. We're writing pen pal letters, and also we're doing a lot more advocacy work. So people are calling on the phone, and we are getting that word out to the media so people can listen and see what's going on. So just keep listening to different people. Realize that the people inside the detention center are that. They are not just detainees, they are people. Like I said, I'm fueled by these relationships. So remembering the humanity of the people as we listen, and just using that to think about also how the system is. We have a detention center where we are keeping people who have just claimed asylum, and people are in there for years. Why is that how our system is? So using this time to educate ourselves on detention, listening to the people, keeping an eye so that we can keep these systems accountable. And I'm going to put in the links with this. There will be a link to one piece that our organization received in the mail that is entitled, "Please Give Us Our Voice." And I think is a really good, it shows that the people who are detained are very well spoken. They know what's going on. And it was their way of saying, listen to us. And I encourage everyone to click on that as well.
Thank you, Anna. Kara?
I'm gonna just back all of that up and say that one thing that this pandemic has allowed us to do, I'm not saying there's anything that's a gift about the pandemic, but it has exposed that the ways that we do things are not necessarily inevitable or natural. And so Anna's point that why are people being kept in detention? Why aren't there community alternatives for housing people while they go through immigration proceedings like there are in many other countries? The US has the biggest detention system in the world. At any day, there's around 400,000 people being kept in immigrant detention, and that number keeps expanding. And back in the 1950s, on any given day, there were 30 people in immigrant detention. The reason that things keep expanding are just because people are making a huge profit off of this business that destroys people's lives and communities and families. And there are just, I think now is the time for us all to imagine different ways of doing things, and that those things are absolutely possible. So, and thank you.
No, thank you. Thank all of you for your participation. And just to sort of piggyback on what Kara said, I think that one thing the pandemic taught us was that when we have the will to adapt and change radically, we can. And I think that people keep talking about returning to normal. I don't think normal was very healthy for most of us. I don't think we realized that. I'm not saying the pandemic is good. I'm saying perhaps we can create something different and better as we leave it. Again, I want to wish Apiman and JB every success possible as their lives continue to evolve. And Kara and Anna, I want to thank you for all the work that you do. And I look forward to further collaboration. For those who are associated directly with Canisius College, I remind you that we have our Borders and Migrations Initiative, which granted in the spring was suspended because of COVID. We plan to do something virtual in the fall. I will link to that as well for all the resources available there. Canisius also last year did house people when Viva was overcrowded. We had hoped to do that again this summer, but clearly that is not going to happen given current conditions. And that people can also volunteer with Justice for Migrant Families through either service learning or just on their own. There's always a need for the phone line and pen pals and activism and many other things that you can do with Justice for Migrant Families. And also through Canisius, those who want to get a more personal experience of this can also participate in the campus ministry trip to the southern border through the Kino Border Initiative, which is another partner that works on advocacy and care and accompaniment of those who are migrating and who are deported. So I want to thank all of you for your time today and for your testimony and for your courage to both work on both sides of this. And I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.